I keep hearing stories from friends who grabbed a budget mirrorless camera because it looked like a steal, only to end up frustrated when the autofocus missed a birthday smile, the low-light shots turned into grainy blobs, or the battery died after a half-hour of shooting. Those regretful moments make the decision feel a lot riskier than it should be, especially when you're trying to level up from a point-and-shoot or a smartphone. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In this review I'm going to walk through why the Panasonic LUMIX S1IIE feels like a more sensible investment for creators who need reliable performance without the learning curve of a full-frame cinema rig. First, let's talk about the hesitation most buyers feel. You've probably watched a dozen YouTube tutorials promising the best full frame for under $2,000, and you're left wondering whether you'll be stuck with a camera that looks impressive on paper but trips over everyday tasks. The S1IIE lands in a sweet spot. It's a full-frame mirrorless body that promises pro-level photo and video output, yet it's packaged in a way that doesn't demand a PhD in cinematography to get decent results. If you've ever tried a cheap alternative and ended up missing that decisive moment because the autofocus lagged, you'll appreciate how the S1IIE's high-speed AFC can capture up to 30 frames per second. In real-world terms, that means you can follow a skateboarder doing a trick or a child running through a sprinkler and still have a sharp frame to choose from. It's the kind of confidence you only get when the focus system actually tracks movement without hunting. Low-light performance is another make-you-break factor. The 24.1 megapixel BSI CMOS sensor isn't just a number, it translates into cleaner images at higher ISOs. I've taken the S1IIE to a dimly lit jazz club, and the results kept the texture of the saxophone's lacquer and the subtle spill of stage lighting without the pink noise that cheaper bodies tend to introduce. When you compare that to a budget mirrorless that forces you to boost ISO into the 6400-8000 range and still ends up with noticeable grain, the S1IIE feels like a more honest partner for low-light storytelling. Stabilization is often the hidden hero for both stills and video. Panasonic's 5-axis in-body stabilization works well enough that you can shoot handheld walk-and-talk segments at around 30 frames per second without a gimbal and still keep the footage steady. In practice, I recorded a short documentary segment while walking through a market, and the final clip required barely any post-stabilization work. That kind of convenience matters when you're on the move and don't want to lug extra gear. On the flip side, the stabilization isn't as aggressive as some dedicated cinema cameras, so if you plan to do extreme low-angle runs or very long handheld shots, you might still benefit from a secondary rig. Lens ecosystem is where the S1IIE starts to show its long-term value. Panasonic's iMount offers a growing selection of native lenses, ranging from fast primes to versatile zooms, and you can also adapt a huge array of Leica, Sigma, and even older Nikon glass with the appropriate adapters. For a creator who already owns a few Panasonic lenses, the S1IIE lets you keep using them without losing any functionality. If you're starting fresh, the ecosystem is still robust enough to build a kit that covers portrait, landscape, and video work without breaking the bank. However, it's worth noting that the iMount doesn't have the same sheer volume of third-party options that a Sony mount enjoys, so if you're reliant on a very specific niche lens, you'll need to double-check compatibility. Menu navigation can feel like a trap for newcomers, especially on cameras that try to cram every setting into layers of submenus. The S1IIE's interface is clean and fairly intuitive. The top dial and rear touchscreen let you switch between stills, video, and custom modes without digging through endless lists. I found that after a short session of reading the Quick Start Guide, I could set a custom video profile and start recording within a minute. That said, the menu does have a pro depth that can overwhelm a hobbyist who just wants to point and shoot. If you're not comfortable tweaking gamma curves or custom white balance matrices, you'll probably spend more time scrolling than shooting until you get the hang of it. Battery confidence is a practical concern that often gets overlooked in spec sheets. The S1IIE uses Panasonic's DMW-BLA14 battery, which on my tests lasted roughly 400 shots in still mode and about an hour of continuous 4K recording. That's respectable for a full-frame body, but it's not a shoot all day without a spare promise. For event photographers or videographers who know they'll be on location for many hours, carrying a spare battery, or two, is still advisable. It's a small extra cost that pays off in peace of mind. So, who should actually consider buying the S1IIE? If you're a serious hobbyist who has outgrown a crop sensor kit and wants a full-frame camera that delivers reliable autofocus, decent low-light capability, and a solid